Thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this hearing today on forecasting and communicating extreme weather. I assure you it's very important to the citizens of Florida because it saves lives. In 2004 and 2005, Florida was hit by a series of severe hurricanes, about 5 of them, I believe, which caused damage in every single county. All 68 counties were damaged, most of them pretty significantly. The insurance companies obviously went ballistic almost immediately and doubled or tripled everybody's rates because the reinsurers did the same thing. And we started getting copies of their gloom and doom forecasts for the future, that it would only get worse the next year and progressively and progressively and progressively, and surely that in just a few years there would be no insurance left for anybody, or there would be no one who could afford the insurance. And the state lawmakers were concerned by that, so they hired their own actuaries, their own data study people, and the result was even worse than the insurance companies had told us. So it was pretty bad. We received one unsolicited suggestion and analysis from a fellow named Dilly, a retired forecaster with the National Weather Service. Any of you ever heard of him? Just shake your head if you haven't heard of him before. And after he retired, he started tracking severe weather as a hobby. And so rather than go review the statistical maps and timelines and take a statistical approach to the whole thing, he focused on way upper weather patterns. And Mr. Dilly told us, he said, I only go 8 years out with my forecast. But he said, I think you guys are good to go for about 8 years before you're going to have another severe hurricane hit Florida. And you may have a little action in the southwest part of the state, but it won't be severe. Most people laughed at this guy, but history proved that he was right on the money. And so I'd like to know if you're familiar with his type of analyses, who does it, or other thoughts that you might have on it, and we might start with Mrs. Bostrom.
Well, that is way out of my bailiwick, but I'd like to, something came to mind while you were talking, and that was the predictions of earthquakes. But you can sometimes be right about something, even if the method that you're using isn't terribly good. So I would really need to know a lot more, and otherwise conclude that this was a coincidence that he was correct.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. You know, a broken clock is right twice, I guess, in a day. And so,
he wasn't right once. He was right 8 times, and everybody else was wrong 8 times.
Sure. I mean, then that's still a small n, 8. So what I tend to sort of look at when I look at these sort of, because as meteorologists, we hear all kinds of things about rodents that predict the weather and almanacs, but I tend to go with the sort of peer-reviewed literature. Now, I would love to see his methodologies published, and I think that's what the peer-reviewed literature is for. So if Mr. Dilly's listening out there, I would invite him to sort of publish that methodology so it can be evaluated, because he may be on to something. I would just suggest that I wouldn't want the National Weather Service and colleagues to sort of change their overarching principles and methods based on a sample of 8.
I'm not suggesting that. Just curious if anybody else has heard of that and what your thoughts about it are.
No, honestly
Dr. Moore? Nobody else have any thoughts about it? Nobody else thinks it's worth investigating?
I don't know this fellow's method, but we could talk about the reinsurance rates in Florida after 2005, if that's of interest. There is the reinsurance rates are influenced by a lot of things, and it is true that there's market forces, so there's an emotional response either to an event that just happened or a sequence of no events. So the rates go up a lot if there's a bunch of bad events, and they go down if there haven't been any for a while, in a way that probably fluctuates more than it should. The risk is sort of a slowly changing thing, but how often the risk is realized is a different thing. So you have car insurance, but you're not going to crash your car every day.
Reinsurance
yeah.
is different in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
Number one, they're all housed in the same offshore island. And they all change the same rate, charge the same rate, and change their rates at the same time. We'd call that a monopoly if they were on the mainland. Thank you, Madam Chair. I see my time's expired.